You're listening to WLPN 105.5 FM in Chicago, and you're listening to Labor Express Radio, Chicago's only English-language labor news and current affairs radio program. News for people by working people. I'm your host, Jerry Meade-Lucero, and this is the Sunday, May 6, 2018 edition of Labor Express. I hope all of our listeners had a celebratory and energizing Mayday this year. We're going to need that renewed energy as the working class is facing some very difficult battles on the horizon. Today's program, being the first since this year's Mayday, which was of course last Tuesday, will feature audio captured from around the country on May 1st. Like the weather and unlike the time clock, we'll start once again this year on the West Coast and move east, including reports from Chicago, the home of Mayday, and Puerto Rico, where the largest and most militant Mayday protests in the country were held this year. But first, Mayday is the most internationalist of holidays, and therefore it's proper to start with a global Mayday message from our friends at RadioLabour based in Canada. This edition of Solidarity News features a message from Sharan Burrow of the ITUC in honor of the holiday.
This is Solidarity News on RadioLabour.
This is a RadioLabour report recorded on May 1st, 2018. I'm Mark Belanger. May 1st, International Workers' Day, is a day set aside to remember labor struggles past and plan for labor struggles future. The day was started to commemorate the 1886 Haymarket strike in Chicago when workers fought for an 8-hour working day. Today, May 1st is used to re-energize struggles for decent work and human rights all around the world. One of the labor organizations coordinating labor events on May 1st is the International Trade Union Confederation. The ITUC is the global body which represents national labor centers such as the Trades Union Congress in the UK and the AFL-CIO in the United States. Sharan Burrow is the ITUC's General Secretary.
Happy May 1. This is a significant day, not just because it represents the struggles past and the struggles of the future, but because this year, May 1, is in the 150th year of the labour movement, the birth of the labour movement with the first national centre in the UK 150 years ago. 150 years of struggle, all of the rights, the working conditions, the safety standards, and of course the wages, minimum wages and collective bargaining, but also the social wage, social protection that unions have fought for and won. But we've also stood for peace and for democracy, the very foundations that make rights, decent wages, decent work possible. And I would say to you that with the global economic model in tatters, the trickle-down economic theory of neoliberalism has failed. Inequality is at historic highs. We've still got massive unemployment. We're at risk of seeing the exclusion of a generation of young people from the dignity of work. And we've got the emergence of platform businesses, the businesses that don't see themselves as employing people, marketplaces they call themselves. Well, we need to be able to organise and bargain collectively for those workers, for workers in the growing informal economy, for workers everywhere. And we're determined to organise to change the rules, because until we change the rules, then it's not possible for us to rebuild the fractured world that we have now. Increasing conflict, the biggest military spend since World War II, the highest number of displaced people ever. And then, of course, the questions of equality, of prosperity, of elimination of violence against women, elimination of the misogyny that is still dividing a world where women are not equally represented in the workplace. We're not equally paid, and indeed, we don't have equal opportunities to actually share the prosperity of what's been an extraordinary growth in world income, and yet captured by the 1% against the interests of everyone else. So May 1, whatever the issues are that your struggle represents in your country today, from conflict and peace and democracy to indeed the security of minimum wages, of collective bargaining rights, of social protection, or building the future to deal with organising and bargaining and the regulatory framework to see workers have a decent future everywhere, whatever the technological base. Today, you are part of a family of almost 208 million workers around the world. Workers and their families determined to fight for social justice, to fight for a peaceful and democratic world, to fight for rights and decent work. And I congratulate you, I salute you, but I genuinely thank you for your courage and your activism. Solidarity.
And that's it. International labor news you can use. I'm Mark Boulanger. Thank you for listening. And remember, it's all about global solidarity.
You're listening to Labor Express Radio News for people by working people, and that was our weekly international labor news update from Solidarity News, produced by RadioLabour in Canada. For more on RadioLabour, see their website at radiolabor.net. Let's dive right into our coverage of Mayday 2018 since we have a lot of ground to cover. Once again this year, I report on Mayday from the left coast. I was able to attend the main Mayday rally and march in downtown LA, organized by the LA County Federation of Labor and the larger Mayday Coalition. Like the rallies and marches across the country, the LA events were significantly smaller this year than in other years since the massive marches in 2006. Hard to say what was the cause of this. It appears from the outside at least that in LA, Chicago, and New York, the planning happened very late this year. Many also speculated that the serious crackdown on undocumented immigrants launched by the Trump administration, which resulted in a major increase in deportations this past year, was also a factor, creating fear among potential attendees. Of course, Mayday this year was on a Tuesday in the middle of the work week, and unlike in some other years like 2006, workers did not organize large-scale strikes or workplace closures in order to attend the marches. In LA in particular, the weather did not help matters either. It was a relatively cold, rainy, gray day in the usually warm and sunny Southern California. But despite it all, a couple thousand people did attend the main march in LA. Being in LA, it's no surprise that the entertainment industry unions were well represented. I spoke with a member of SAG-AFTRA, the Screen Actors Guild, at the rally.
Hi, I'm Ellen Crawford. I'm a union member. I'm a member of SAG-AFTRA, a member of Actors Equity, and I'm a very proud member of the labor movement as well. So
why is SAG-AFTRA out here on Mayday? Why is it important to be out here?
Because, we all need to support each other, no matter what work you do. I mean, I do find that unions seem to be under attack right now. I think it's just because everyone needs to look at everyone doing work of any kind, whether you be in a union or not, as people who deserve decent working conditions, safe working conditions, and a decent wage to raise their families. So we're out here to support working families.
Now, of course, your union represents people in the entertainment industry. This is the kind of the heart of the entertainment industry here in LA. I think, the public impression might be that, why would people in the entertainment industry need a union? Can you talk about that?
Sure. I mean, we're doing it's an odd sort of work to do. I admit that, but it is our work, and just like all the other people here, we're struggling to raise families, to put kids through college, to buy a home, or rent a place to live, or just put food on the table like anybody else. Most of our union are not the rich, entertainment industry people, and even those people are very aware that they're fortunate, and frankly, it could be over tomorrow. So because most of us have come up through a pretty tough time trying to piece it together, I think we understand not only other workers, but also we are a gig economy. So somebody was asking me earlier, is it because the gig economy, the things are changing? And I said, no, not really, because we've been negotiating good contracts for our people for decades, and we are a gig economy. So it's possible to get good working conditions and wages.
I think it's important what you said, too, about the fact that, I think, again, the public impression might be, well, actors, they're paid well and all this stuff. But, of course, the vast majority of people that are in SAG-AFTRA are not making millions of dollars, right? They're just working people like everybody else.
No, far from it. We're struggling just like everybody else.
And I think what's unique, too, maybe about people in your industry is they also have a voice, maybe, to talk about these issues of working people that maybe, your bus driver or your janitor so might not have that platform. So is that something that members of SAG-AFTRA feel strongly about too, is being able to use their role in the industry to be able to spread the word about the issues that working people are facing?
I think that's very true. And if you think about our members and what they do for a living, whether they be broadcasters who are covering events and people and what's happening to people, or whether they be performers that are acting or singing or trying to put forward a message of what people's lives are all about. So it kind of comes natural in that way, where our business is being a messenger. So I think, yes, we sometimes have can be a more obvious mouthpiece, but we also, I think, take the time to look into things and find out what's going on around us. We play everybody, so we have to get to know everybody as best we can. So,
are there any specific issues facing SAG-AFTRA right now that are important to know about?
Well, I think what we all face is when we have employers that they're looking at their bottom line, and that's true of any worker, right? And they're looking at their bottom line, and sometimes may or may not see the people who are working for them in a real sense, in a human being sort of sense. So it's in that general way we have it, but also what SAG-AFTRA is facing is what a lot of people are facing, is technologically everything's moving at lightning speed, and you have to stay ahead of it and adapt as the world changes more and more rapidly. I think it's true in other unions with automation, with technology. It's not just SAG-AFTRA, it's everybody. Everybody's trying to keep up,
Right, and the technology is often being used more and more. And SAG-AFTRA, I know, has faced this a lot, where their labor is being exploited more easily by their employers, but the workers themselves are not getting remunerated for that.
Right, and I think that it's a funny thing, because as business models change, sometimes the employers aren't even exactly sure where it's going. So I think in all fairness, we're all trying to figure it out together. But when I meet with other labor leaders, they're explaining how technology, it's like who owns the content, It's true for other, who owns the data. It's true for other unions as well. It's a big question that we all face, and it affects everyone.
You're listening to Labor Express Radio, Chicago's only English language labor news and current affairs radio program, and our coverage of Mayday 2018 in Los Angeles. I was also able to speak with a member of ITUC, the International Alliance of Theatrical Stage Employees, who, like most people I spoke to with that day, raised issues of skyrocketing housing costs in LA, which is making life very difficult for working people in the city. She also raised the issue of Janus versus AFSCME, which we've covered extensively here on Labor Express.
My name is Leslie Lytle, and I'm a member of the IATSE. I'm actually a dual card. I'm a member of Local 871 and also 44.
Okay.
And I'm also a delegate with the LA Federation of Labor.
Okay.
One of the number one reasons why the IATSE is here is to represent, we're a private sector. And so we're one of the locals that are not going to necessarily be on the very front line as far as what's happening with the Supreme Court decision with Janus versus AFSCME. But we've got to show solidarity to all of our public sector brothers and sisters that are out here in force. So we're here with SAG-AFTRA. We're also here with the Musicians Local 47. And we're here with entertainment just because we want to show them that we're not going away. That union solidarity needs to stand strong with our brothers and sisters, because if the Supreme Court decides that right to work becomes nationwide, we're all in trouble. This is all about workers' rights, and it's about immigrants' rights, and it's about standing together in solidarity to fight back for things that we need, which are wages. I mean, the city of Los Angeles, if you look around here, there are apartments that are being built that 99% of the people standing in this crowd are never going to be able to afford, because wages have not kept up with the amount of what rental spaces are going for. So at the ground roots, positively boots on the ground right here, that's what we're fighting for, is a chance to live in our communities and work in our communities and be paid as part of that community and build strong communities as we're doing so. With higher wages comes a better education system, because parents aren't forced to work more than 2 jobs per person, and they're home so that they can be there with their kids when they come home from school, help them with their homework, set them on the path that's going to lead them to college and onto a better, state of the way that California is going. So, like I said, everything is contingent upon us standing together right now and just being a big part of what is happening And that is to stand together and to show people that workers are the families and are the individuals and are the people that hold this country together.
You made a good point about pointing out that, public sector workers are completely under attack right now at Janice. But going back, from Wisconsin and before that, of course, there's been this attempt by the media and by the economic elite and so on to kind of, I think, pit private sector and public sector workers against each other, right? You saw that a lot in Wisconsin where they were saying, well, why are these public sector workers, why should they get all these benefits or all these, rights if the private sector is not getting them? As someone that's in the private sector, what do you say to that kind of divide and conquer type of strategy?
I think when you say divide and conquer, we split the entire vote, and that's ridiculous because we are not an us versus them. We are a we, and we all need to stand together. It's not against private versus public. The public sector people are the people that you meet on your daily commute. So those are the people that you meet every single day when you go someplace. The same thing with the private sector. The only difference is the fact that they're set up and they're run by a different group of people. It's the same mentality though, and it's the same reason that we're all here. We all joined a union because we wanted somebody who actually had a voice collectively to allow us to bargain for a unit, as opposed to always having to go against our bosses and say, I'd like a raise, I've been here for 10 years, I deserve it. Or my benefits program doesn't include the fact that my child has autism. These are just ways that we collectively bargain for each other. It doesn't matter if it's private, it doesn't matter if it's public, we're all the same. We're all part of a union, and unionization is what brings us together. And the solidarity is the working group that solidifies our voices.
It does seem, too, that approach of saying, well, the public sector workers, why should they get all these benefits if the private doesn't get it, is almost the reverse way of looking at it, right? We should be looking at bringing everybody up rather than bringing everybody down, it seems to me.
Exactly. That's the crab pot mentality where somebody's trying to make it so you pull them down and bring them down to your level. The Postal Service doesn't actually affect anybody. They're an entity within themselves. They don't touch anything as far as government assistance. They don't touch anything as far as government funding. They're self-funded by themselves. It's ridiculous that people should say, why should they get benefits and I shouldn't? It should be, why don't I get benefits? How can I get that for me? And how can I get that for you and for him and for him and for her? Because once we all have the benefits together, we're a stronger and more healthy and more educated and more unionized and more unified coalition of people. And honestly, when we're happy and we're healthy, we can do more for each other. And honestly, this whole thing is all about what do you do to help your brothers and sisters? Us versus them doesn't work. We works.
You mentioned already that the cost of housing and living, of course, here in LA is getting outrageous and it's very hard for working people. What are the other issues you say that are really specific to LA for working people?
Well, commuting is obviously, there's just a lot of people that are in this area, and we've got a climate that supports people coming out. We've got a climate that doesn't snow. It doesn't really rain much, and so it's a beautiful place to live. So we've got too many people and not enough housing, not enough education systems. Our infrastructure is starting to crumble. If wages were increased, that would help us. And, those are the things that we're actually looking at. It's just different ways to make Los Angeles more negotiable for everyone. Downtown right now, with all of the new clubs and all of the new restaurants and all of the new places to actually come, it's revitalized what was once a very dark and dismal city in the evenings where people wanted to bug out of here at 6 o'clock at night. Now you've got people that are staying here until 2 o'clock. And it's brought a vibrancy and an excitement to the city. And it's just unfortunate that the fact that so many people can't afford to take advantage of that. And that's what I want to see happen. And I think that's what everyone here wants to see happen, is just that everyone gets a fair share to enjoy what is happening in this city and what is happening in our communities, because it just brings us closer.
Great. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
You're very, very welcome. I appreciate the opportunity to speak. Thank you.
You're listening to Labor Express Radio News for people by working people in our coverage of Mayday 2018 in Los Angeles. Of course, entertainment worker unions were not the only ones represented at the LA Mayday March and Rally. I was able to speak with Rusty Hicks, the president of the LA County Federation of Labor. Why is it important that people come out to this Mayday celebration every year?
Well, it's really to send a message that we are united, that we stand together, and that these streets are ours. While Donald Trump may have his tweets, I like to say we own these streets. And so this year for Mayday, we're really sending a message of the protection and defense of all working people all across Los Angeles, the protection and defense of immigrant workers and their families, and then calling on everyone to put this action towards the ballot box in November to ensure that we make our voices heard in Washington, D.C.
Are there specific issues this year, like specific themes of the Mayday March this year that are particularly important that you want to emphasize?
Well, certainly, when it comes to working families, you can talk about tax breaks for the rich. You can talk about an attempt to undercut health care. You can talk about the destruction of retirement security. For working people, there are a whole host of issues that we're really dealing with now that we didn't 2 years ago. When it comes to immigrant families, DACA recipients are obviously under attack. TPS recipients are under attack. And really virtually all immigrant workers in Los Angeles, but in many ways around the country, are under attack. And so I think it's important that we go to the street and send a strong message.
Are there specific issues in LA here that working people are facing that maybe be a little bit different than other parts of the country?
Well, certainly here, one of the biggest issues that we're facing is a housing shortage. I know there's housing issues across the country, but it's particularly acute in Los Angeles, where there simply isn't enough housing, and rents are too high on that housing that is available. So as they like to say, the rent is too damn high. It's too damn high. And so as a result, you have large numbers of homeless sisters and brothers on the street each and every night, over 50,000 in the county of Los Angeles. About 27,000 here in the city of Los Angeles. So that issue in particular, the homeless challenge and the challenge of having a roof over every head, is something that we're really dealing with.
Are there some particular ways of addressing that issue that are out there, like some proposals about how to bring more low-income housing to Los Angeles?
Well, certainly the labor movement partnered with our community allies to put an initiative on the ballot in 2016, November of 2016, that essentially says that if you're going to get a variance, if you're going to get a change from the city, you've got to include affordable housing as part of that project, and you have to give local workers who need the jobs the most, you have to give them those jobs. And so I think there are many proactive solutions that progressive-minded allies are coming together to put forward, to take matters into our own hands when the city hasn't stepped up and done the right thing.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's very nice meeting you.
Probably the largest union contingent in this year's Mayday March in LA was not surprisingly SEIU, the Service Employees International Union. I spoke with several SEIU members during the march.
I am Michelle Reed, and I'm with SEIU Local 2015, and I am one of the executive board members for Region 1 in Southern California.
And you guys have one of the largest contingents here, it looks like, at the Mayday Parade. Why is it important for SEIU to be represented here today?
Well, it's very important for all working class and also SEIU because we are home care providers local, and it means so much to have wage increase. We are fighting for a contract right now. We only make $11.18 an hour. We are the largest diverse union there are in the world of all nationality, and no one should be subject to have to be deported, excluded, and be low on the totem pole because all of us need to put bread and butter and stuff on our tables. And it's injustice, and we out here fighting for justice and fairness and equality and inclusive.
Yeah, home health care workers are some of the most exploited workers in our economy, and of course, it's jobs like that are really the growing part of the economy these days.
Absolutely, because we give independent living, we save lives, we save taxpayers' dollars where seniors, disabled, and all could have a chance to live independently, live longer. A patient may walk into a nursing home or a mental facility and they have no chance because the nurses have not the time to give them quality care versus when you're at home, you choose what you want to eat, what you want to wear that day. Is dignity and respect for the clients and for ourselves.
You mentioned the fact that home health care workers make less than $12 an hour in a city like LA where housing prices are outrageous. I've been hearing that all day today from people about housing prices. That's going to be tough.
Exactly. For you to live in a 2-bedroom apartment or house, it's going to take at least 3 other people to live with you, making 40 hours a week. So where's your privacy? You know, it's not fair. And then you got to decide if you're going to get your medicine versus if you're going to put food on the table, or you're going to pay your water bill, or you're going to pay your light bill, your gas bill. You got to really say, just break it down and do something without.
Now, I know your local represents home health care workers. I know there's other SEIU local that's currently in negotiations in the schools right now, right? And I think they even took a strike vote because the negotiations haven't gone well. Do you know much about that situation?
Well, I know Local 99 are fighting for a contract. They need a raise and everything, just like we are. There's a lot of locals of SEIU, a lot of locals that's non-SEIU are in contract fight for a livable standard wage, better contracts. There is money in the state of California. We got it put on the ballot that the rich pay their fair share in Texas. If you make over $55,000 a year, you got to pay your fair share. So there's money. So now here they want to build 2 new county jails, a mental jail and a homeless jail for $3.5 billion. That's not fair. Injustice.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Sorry I took you away from your folks here.
All good. It is an honor and a pleasure to put the word out.
Hi, my name is Michelle Parker. I'm a registered nurse at Riverside Community Hospital supporting SEIU 1-to-1 RN out here today. We're out here marching for several reasons. Of course, patient safety and staffing. We care about our patients. We think everyone should have health care. But we're also out here to support the immigrants and the community at large.
Seems like you have a pretty large contingent here of nurses. Are there specific issues facing nurses right now that you're particularly concerned about?
Once again, staffing ratios, very important. Auxiliary staff also, which would be the CNAs and the food service workers and everyone that makes up the embodiment of the hospital. The RN leads the team, but the team can't go forward without all the players in place. So that would be all the workers you see out here today.
You're listening to Labor Express Radio, Chicago's only English language labor news and current affairs radio program, and our coverage of Mayday 2018 in Los Angeles. Perhaps one of the most interesting and unique aspects of the Mayday events in LA this year was the focus on concerns of women workers and sexual exploitation in the workplace. Reflecting the resurgence of feminist demands in the wake of the Me Too movement, many of the speakers at the opening rally raised issues of sexual violence and oppression facing working-class women and transgender people. Lotus Lane, a sex worker, spoke from the podium about how the recently passed federal legislation entitled SESTA, which ostensibly was meant to target the problem of sex trafficking, has instead further criminalized sex workers, forcing them deeper into the shadows and leading to worse exploitation, including deaths.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lotus Lane. I'm an activist, a journalist, an organizer, a mother, and a sex worker. And I'm here on behalf of the Free Speech Coalition and Advocacy Network, dedicated to the rights of workers and producers in the adult industry, aka porn. And I want to thank the ACLU for inviting me to speak to you today on behalf of the rights of the workers I represent. Last month, the United States Congress actually passed a bill that criminalizes my ability and the ability of many other sex workers to organize. Ironically, this bill, called SESTA, or Stop Enabling Sex Traffickers Act, rather than go after traffickers themselves, it actually targets workers. And that's who we want to protect. Within days, social media platforms where workers were able to communicate about safe working conditions, police violence and coercion and threats, those were shut down. So in the days since, many sex workers have gone missing and actually have been murdered as a result of our safeguard being taken away. This law disproportionately affects and targets immigrant workers, trans workers, workers of color, and disabled and queer people. We are the ones amongst the population that experience the most discrimination and the least access to resources when it comes to banking access, healthcare, and stable housing. We are being forced into the shadows, and we're likely to suffer more exploitation, coercion, and violence. As a sex worker, I understand the importance and the risk of trafficking, and I also understand the clear difference in what I do, which is consensual sex work, not forced sex trafficking, and they're not the same. Laws like SESTA unfortunately treat them as though they are. I challenge your biases. What is a sex worker? We are people that contribute to the economy. We pay taxes, we have functional lives, We have families that we raise and support. We're caring and compassionate to our neighbors. We are your neighbors. We are your family members, and you may not even know it. We are human, and we exist. Thank you. Thank you. You may not understand sex work, and you may not understand what I do, but I ask that you please support our cause. On June 2nd, we are also marching and rallying with our fellow sex workers and allies in support of International Whores Day of Action. And I ask that you stand with us both in spirit and in person. And I ask that you say it and really hear me out today, that sex work is real work. Sex work is real work. Sex work is real work. Thank you.
We need to take a station ID break, but when we return, we'll have more audio from Mayday 2018, shifting the focus first to Chicago and then to Puerto Rico, thanks to our friends on Building Bridges, your community and labor report on WBAI in New York City. You're listening to Labor Express Radio News for people by working people. Rather unexpectedly and unfortunately, our Labor Express Radio reporters in Chicago were unable to collect audio at the Mayday events in Chicago this year. But never fear, we do have a report on Mayday 2018 from the home of Mayday via our friends on Building Bridges, your community and labor report, which broadcasts on WBAI in New York City. I was able to link up Building Bridges with a good friend of Labor Express, Jorge Mojica from the Arise Chicago Workers Center. Here are some audio excerpts from Jorge's report from Chicago delivered by phone to our friends at Building Bridges.
There are, several hundred people. The program is just starting. I can see several labor unions, many labor unions. I see the purple colors of, SEIU, the Service Employees International Union. I can see United Electrical Workers. I can see the painters. I can see the Labor Council for Latin American Advancement. And also, several political parties participating here. So that's where I'm at.
So what does it look like in terms of the issues that are drawing people together today? What are the most significant points? We've been starting so far with the issues of immigrants. Is that a fundamental issue in Chicago?
It is, but at the same time, we always like to tell the story. Mayday, the original Mayday 1886, was mostly immigrants, mostly German, British, and Russian immigrants in the city of Chicago who had the worst working conditions. People don't remember that. People don't remember Mayday was born in Chicago. So immigrants back in 2006 brought it back and, brought Mayday to its origins as a labor issue, not only as an immigrant issue. So I think finally people are making the connection that immigrant issues are labor issues and the other way around. As long as you have a population that is overexploited because of, immigration status or anything, the rest of the labor cannot advance because it will always be pitted against the other segment of that labor, which is the overexploited immigrant labor. So we are putting together immigrant and labor as one. In English, International Workers' Day is, it can be put in two ways. It's the day all nations commemorate May Day, but for us, it's the day of international workers, which are migrants. Migrants are nothing but workers who work in a different country. So I think that's the bottom of this May Day celebration today.
And Jorge, how are immigrants surviving the attacks on them by federal forces and sometimes local forces? How is it in Chicago?
Well, Chicago has the privilege of being a sanctuary city. We have a sanctuary county and then a sanctuary state, whatever that means. So we feel a little bit more protected. I don't mean to say that the, immigration services cannot act here. They do, but we haven't seen large raids. We haven't seen, many of the big operations immigration has conducted, for instance, in California or some other states. What we see here is immigration going to pick individual people who have police records. But that happens at home. It's a one-by-one operation, nothing large. Now, the last month or so, what we are seeing, too, is some immigration offices delivering notices to employers to let them know that they are going to be checking the immigration papers of all workers at any given place. They don't detain, they don't arrest people, but certainly they dislocate them because, 200, 300, 800 workers may lose their jobs at any given moment just because of the notice immigration and customs enforcement are giving around. So they are trying to dislocate, trying to make living worse for immigrants who are here undocumented.
And we're speaking with Jorge Mojica with the Arise for Change Workers Center celebrating Mayday in Chicago. And I believe that you have one of the activists as well who's participating in the Mayday activities in Chicago for us to speak with.
Yes, I have one of the activists actually coming from the suburbs from Chicago, and they have been participating in these Mayday commemorations ever since the 2006 marches. His name is Cristobal Cavazos. Hello, good afternoon.
Hey, happy Mayday.
Happy Mayday to you.
Now, you've been participating in Mayday events in Chicago for years now. How does this one look like it's stacking up at a time when we are in the era of Trump and the masses should be pouring out in support of the workers, in support of the immigrant workers as well of this country?
Yeah, we've been trying to get people, we've been flying for about 2 months here, trying to get people out, and it's been a tough climate. Some people are afraid. Today being Tuesday, I don't think it helped to turn out a lot, but even still, we're out here right now. We see a lot of people on the streets right now. We're here at the Haymarket Memorial, which is, of course, where everything came to pass with the famous marchers in 1886, and there's a beautiful spirit here. And I think that one of the things that we're doing today on this May Day is renewing our spirit of fight, renewing our passion here, because during this time when there's so much attacks going on, we really need to find as organizers a way to motivate the people here. And I think that's one of the things that we do with May Day, is we come back to re-energize, to refresh ourselves, and to recommit ourselves to the spirit of this day, which is the international working class. And that the working class, we're all united here. There's no illegal immigrants. There is no workers. We're all one working class across the world. And here, coming together, I feel the love and I feel the spirit to go back and organize back in our town.
Could you go a little bit deeper into the organizing work that you yourself do, and who are the people that you work with?
Yeah, we're with Immigrant Solidarity DuPage. We're an immigrant rights organization in DuPage County, just a little bit to the west of Chicago. And there is a lot of service sector jobs. There's a lot of restaurant jobs. There's a lot of warehouse jobs, a lot of yard workers there. And we're a worker center, and we are organizing workers that have wage theft or labor abuse, any kind of issues there. We're out there with the workers, and we're trying to bring the spirit of syndicalism, of union rights, of working love, of fraternity with all the workers. We're trying to launch that here in our county, and it's beautiful to be here at Haymarket right now and remember the people that came before us, that fought and died for workers' rights. And, I feel that the blood is still running and still fertilizing and inspiring us today.
I'm wondering if there are specific demands or issues or the way that you see organizing, for example, around the TPS status, which has been summarily canceled by the Trump administration. And are there specific things that are going to be and are happening in Chicago to demand that there be a renewal of the TPS, the temporary protective status, for tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people who are now slated for deportation?
Yeah, it's a huge issue. And in our own organization, we had a forum exactly on TPS last month with some El Salvadorian activists. And we're trying to work with the Central American organizations as much as we can, and also with the Anglo community, because we can't forget in the 80s there was a big Central American solidarity movement. And that's part of our demand here today. Our own group, we're calling for a just and comprehensive immigration reform for the DACA members, the people without documents, and also for TPS. but we cannot forget TPS, and that's something that that we've been working with our Central American brothers here to bring to pass and to bring this to the core, because we had a forum last month, and there was so much enthusiasm coming out of that forum and talking about the United States' role in Central America in the 80s, and people were just remembering stuff and learning stuff for the first time, and there was a real spirit of unity and struggling for TPS and for a legalization for the people here that are losing their status.
And Jorge before had talked about workplace raids. Are those apparent also in the areas that you're working in?
Yeah, you know what? Well, that's the fear. We haven't seen a raid yet in our own where we live, but we've just heard of one. This past week, there has been a raid. It wasn't in our area, but it was not too far away. But that's something that's being done to scare workers, to keep workers in their place, to keep workers from organizing, to keep workers from opening their mouths. So we are trying to reach the workers, and this day we put out a Mayday message urging the workers that there's power in the union, that being afraid and being divided would be detrimental to us. But we can't let these raids scare us, and we can't let the workers be scared about this. So that's why we want to get out there today, and we're out. We're putting out press releases. We're here. The news crews are here, but we are trying to be in the eye. They're telling workers, do not be afraid, and join us here and join our organizations and take part here in the movement.
We just finished a piece a moment ago from Tennessee, where more than 100 workers were rounded up in a meat processing plant. 56 of them were held and were shipped out to a detention center indefinitely in Louisiana. In New York, what is happening now is that ICE is coming into the courthouses and profiling and taking people out summarily and picking them up, as well as we actually have activists from the immigrants' rights community that are being targeted and have been picked up. So while you are a sanctuary city, is the pressure beginning to be ramped up in the same way that it is in New York?
I think to a certain extent, yes. We can't be sure about anything here. You know, with this climate here, nothing really surprises us. But yeah, we are on guard here. Our own group, we have a rapid response network for when people see immigration or people hear of anything. We're able to send people out there and to check it out and to be there in solidarity if we can. But no, this is something that's real. I think there's a real fear that the administration with Trump is unpredictable, and you know, we're continually surprised here. But I think that the beauty here in Chicago is that we've been quite active in the movement, and we have quite a bit of movement on the ground. And I think that that's been part of stalling some of these activities, because they know that there's so many organizations here, and we would be there in a second. Anything that we hear of. But, you know, that's where organization comes in, and that's where they take advantage of any kind of division. So we're just trying to stay organized here.
And I'm wondering how you see this effort continuing and the fight against xenophobia, which has been utilized, as most fascists do, certainly by the Trump administration, to rally his base and continue to propel himself forward. And I assume that in the next election cycle, it will even be more virulent. So how do you see kind of creating that national nexus that is going to bring the organized labor into its support for our sister and brother refugees, migrants, immigrants, who of course are the labor that have always built this country?
You know, some of us were at Labor Notes conference last month, and we saw a big outpouring of support and a lot of energy and a lot of young unionists that were there, and they were talking about this. I mean, they about the unionism that knows no boundaries, that knows no country, that throws out the xenophobia. I feel enthusiastic about the young trade unionists coming up, people in the worker centers like ourselves. We work very closely with people, the union members. We just marched with some of these people this morning, and we feel that there is a new front here and a new conscience here. And I feel that it's time that really the unity comes in the working class economic issues. And just like in the 30s, when the workers came together of all different nationalities and they come together to form these working class organizations and to form these strikes here, I feel something new coming up. And I think the youth that are out here today at Mayday, I feel this. You see Latinos mixing with African Americans. You see the youth. You see older people here. You see quite a bit of outpouring. And I think I'm optimistic for what we've seen in labor notes and also with what's going on in the workers' center. That ever since the immigrant rights movement has taken power with Mayday in 2006, I think that the labor, at least in Chicago, and the immigrant rights movement have seen a real crossbreeding and a real flowering here, and we're going to continue to try to build that here in this community and hopefully all over the country.
And I wonder if you can return us to our host for this segment, Jorge Mojica.
Yes,
I want to thank you for joining us.
All right,
and
sure.
the struggle
Whenever.
does continue, but we're there with you, and good May Day.
Oh, happy Mayday to you. Thank you.
Hello.
Jorge, that was
Good job.
exciting. That was stimulating. Now, I know you're all going to be marching to the ICE Center. So take us out with the final message for May Day and for a struggle that will continue as workers of the world unite because?
Well, because we have to be united. Divided, we are defeated all the time. I believe that only organizing workers can change the political and social situation. Many people trust politicians and they say, well, if we elect such and such party, all problems will be solved. We don't believe that. We believe that regardless of what party politicians belong to, they have to be forced to act on behalf of the working class, but only when the working class is organized and can force them to act. So that's our daily struggle, and that's our struggle for this day and all the days to come. Organized labor, organized workers, regardless of whether, they are immigrants or not, regarding of race, of creed, etc. We saw several years ago in the Fight for 15, the McDonald's workers, it didn't matter if you were a U.S.-born citizen or if you were an immigrant without papers, you got paid minimum wage. So that's what unites us, the common exploitation, and that's what we have to overcome.
Jorge Mojica, thank you for being with us. We'll see you in many protests to come, and as we make it so that the workers of the world do unite. And Jorge...
In as many as I can, yes.
Okay.
You're listening to Labor Express Radio, which calls only English language labor news and current affairs radio program. The biggest Mayday marches in the U.S. this year were in the U.S. colony of Puerto Rico. Not surprising, given the growing and intensifying anger on the island towards the federal government's response to the disaster of Hurricane Maria. Much like in New Orleans after Hurricane Katrina, the chaos created by the disaster and the government's shameful lack of response is being used to push a privatization agenda on the working people of Puerto Rico. Mimi Rosenberg and Ken Nash of Building Bridges spoke with fellow WBAI radio personality Danielle Villa of the WBAI program La Voz Latina as the Mayday events were taking place in Puerto Rico last Tuesday. They report that perhaps as many as 100,000 people took part in one of the 7 marches and numerous other protests held that day on the island. Unfortunately, the May march was met with brutality on the part of the police. A federal judge has since ordered an investigation into police behavior in the wake of the violence of May 1st.
So how has the day begun in Puerto Rico? What does it look like? Have the masses really responded to the crisis, both the crisis in the wake of Hurricane Maria and the crisis of the junta, the Fiscal Control Board?
Today there were probably like 6 or 7 different marches taking place in Puerto Rico. About 5 of them were all convening at the financial district. That is a march leaving from the Department of Education, another march leaving from the University of Puerto Rico, another march left from a stadium called Irán Bithorn. Altogether, about 5 marches convened at the financial district. What happened is that the police set up a barrier or a barricade where they will not allow people to march straight to in front of the offices of the Fiscal Control Board. As a result, there was some minor clashes, minor, of course, talking as a person who was not in it, Of course, if you get arrested and you get beat up by the cops, it is not minor. But in the greater scope of the situation, it was minor in the sense that it was, there were not hundreds of people arrested, but several people were arrested in some clashes that took place between the police and the demonstrators as people, thousands of people, tried to march on to go directly in front of the Fiscal Control Board, but the police would not allow it, obviously following the orders of the state.
And you had mentioned when we called earlier that people were tear gassed?
Yes, people were tear gassed, but the situation became heated. There was some rock throwing and some nasty exchanges between police and demonstrators, and eventually the police did come and beat some people up, and they did throw tear gas. About half an hour ago, they were entering part of Rio Piedras, which is a university town, where they were following maybe one or more people for some reason into that urbanization. Dozens of police going into that small residential area, terrorizing people. People were furious at the police. So right now that area is very tense. But I should say on a greater scope, the situation which is going on in Puerto Rico is unparalleled, Mimi and Ken. What is happening recently, and we know that it's pure rhetoric, but the governor of Puerto Rico, who has actually been working hand in glove with the Fiscal Control Board, which is incidentally is a body which was signed into law by former President Obama. This governor, although he is pro-statehood, has denounced that the Fiscal Control Board is an imperial creation and that it is colonizing Puerto Rico, and he has refused to accept some of the orders of the Fiscal Control Board. So much so, incredibly, that the Senate of Puerto Rico, under the leadership of the lone representative of the Puerto Rican Independence Party, passed a motion 1 week ago stating that they will not give any more money to the Fiscal Control Board. The Fiscal Control Board has a budget of $60 million, and it's supposed to be paid by the people of Puerto Rico. They wanted to increase it to $70 million, but the Senate, which is controlled by pro-statehooders, incredibly said no. They allied themselves with this one independence party person, Dalmau is his name, and they said, no, we will not give the Fiscal Control Board any more money. And although we know that there is a little bit of jockeying for political reasons, of course, they really are collaborating with the Fiscal Control Board because they're in the process of privatizing education, shutting down some campuses of the University of Puerto Rico. They want to privatize the energy company and the water, aqueduct and sewage company, for example. And yet, at the same time, there is a real clash of interests between those that are colonized and those that are doing the colonizing.
Daniel, before we proceed further, and our other guest, could you expand on the privatization of the education system and especially the formation of charter schools and closing schools and laying off teachers?
Yes, this director of the Department of Education, her name is Kelleher. She came from the United States, imposed on Puerto Rico. She knows practically nothing about Puerto Rico. She is of Puerto Rican descent, but she has already made a list of close to 300 schools that she wants to privatize. There have been several demonstrations, many, I would say actually hundreds of demonstrations across the country against the shutting down of these schools, not only led by the Teachers Federation, UNETE, and other Educamos and other teachers organizations, but even the very conservative Asociación de Maestros, the Teachers Association, which is a very conservative organization. Even they have organized demonstrations against the privatization. Another thing that they want to do is to privatize the University of Puerto Rico. There are various campuses that they want to shut down, and Ricardo could expound a little bit more specific on this. But there have been demonstrations and protests even at those campuses where even the faculty and the deans in charge of those directors of those campuses are totally opposed. At this point, it's interesting. I'm from a very small town of about 30,000 people called Las Piedras. This is the way that the battle has gone. It's incredible because it's a town that is not known for having a rebellious political leadership. However, last week, the mayor of my town, I'm proud to say, of Las Piedras, actually blocked the trucks, the providers of the electric energy company. He did not allow them to leave the town of Las Piedras. He says, look, I have thousands of people in my town that do not have electricity. I am not going to allow you to leave Las Piedras. We need your services. We need you to connect our people to electricity. And he actually surrounded the vehicles from the... he did not allow them with... he surrounded them with municipal vehicles. And that's almost a revolutionary step in Las Piedras, my brother.
And we are speaking with Daniel Vila, who is our own WBAI's La Voz Latina, which airs on Monday evenings from 10 to 11 p.m. And we're speaking to him on the ground in Puerto Rico. And he has with him a friend who's going to tell us more about what's been happening in Mayday in Puerto Rico, and that is Ricardo Ortiz.
Here he is. He'll introduce himself.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Ricardo Ortiz. I'm originally from Caguas, Puerto Rico. I'm a working class man. I was born and raised right here in the town of Caguas.
And Ricardo, let me ask you this. How many people do you think came out in Puerto Rico today? And even though there were separate marches, what were the major themes that brought people to Mayday in Puerto Rico?
Oh, definitely. There were these, it's a general opposition to this disaster capitalism measures that the vulture bondholders are imposing upon Puerto Rico through this fiscal control board under the auspices of the United States government. As you know, U.S. Congress, got into act this law called Promesa. The Puerto Rican, the rest of what it means. So people are opposing the charter school system that is being imposed upon it, the privatization of the electric energy public corporation. They're opposing the privatization of the water resources company, which is also public. People are opposing also that the fiscal control board is demanding that a public workers' retirement funds being made into payments for the so-called debt that these vulture funds are trying to acquire from the people. So the estimate is that probably more than 100,000 people have been rallying and demonstrating around the island.
Unfortunately, I have to cut that coverage of the Mayday events in Puerto Rico short due to time constraints. I want to thank me, Rosenberg, and Ken Nash of Building Bridges for making that audio available. You can find out more at buildingbridgesradio.com. Again, that's buildingbridgesradio.com. That's all for tonight's program. Of course, you can always find out more about the issues, organization, and people discussed here on Labor Express by going to our Facebook page, which is easy to find at facebook.laborexpress.org, facebook.laborexpress.org. I'm also experimenting with a Labor Express Radio YouTube page, and I'm looking for listener feedback on that. So please check out our Facebook page for a link to the YouTube page as well. Labor Express is a nonprofit 501c3 member of IBEW Local 1220. The views expressed on Labor Express are those of its producers, not those of IBEW. Labor Express is a production of the Committee for Labor Access in Chicago, the world capital of the labor movement. The songs our theme is called Worker Songs, written by Ed Pickford and recorded by the Dropkick Murphys. Tuning next Sunday at 8 p.m. for another edition of Labor Express.